I resolved the tension that had been building. Okay, so in a 94 article, Joe says, I conceive appraisement. So what appraisement means is that an entrepreneur is looking at various inputs like, capital goods and, raw natural resources, perhaps some workers with their various capabilities in terms of labor output. And the entrepreneur appraises what is the value of this bundle of inputs. Okay. Meaning ultimately, like, what could I sell this stuff for? What could I produce with this bundle of inputs and then sell that for? And so you're going through that mental process to appraise, to assign values, monetary values to this collection of items. And so here's what Salerno says about that. I conceive appraisement is neither knowledge nor arithmetic, but is something new under the sun, introduced into the world only when the institutional prerequisites of a market economy are fulfilled. The social process of appraising thus transcends the purely individual operations of knowing and computing at the same time that it complements them in creating the indispensable conditions for rational choosing by entrepreneurs and resource owners cooperating in the division of labor. Okay, so here, let me just, because I thought this was a good analogy I had, in case you're still struggling and you're like, well, yeah, but I still don't get it, Bob. So I'm still now quoting from my Mises.org article. Let me try to motivate the point this way. When we use a thermometer to measure the temperature inside an oven in a commercial bakery, the device transmits information to us. There really is an objective fact of the matter of the kinetic energy of the air molecules bouncing around inside the oven, and the thermometer is an imperfect way of translating that data to us in a form our minds can comprehend and incorporate into our decisions. But there's no doubt that the oven really has a temperature, regardless of our measuring it with a thermometer. In contrast, if we ask, how much economic value does this oven possess, then that's a fundamentally different question. This isn't an objective fact that is embedded in the arrangement of matter. The question takes into account all of the subjective preferences of everyone on the planet Earth, as well as their expectations about the possibility of transforming matter into different forms. It is a mind-boggling question, in fact, that can be answered only by setting up a market economy and then making informed guesses as to what people would be willing to pay for that oven. Okay, so I hope that helps. Again, whether you think this is worth me spending an episode on or not, I hope I've driven home to you and it's shown the distinction, right? That, in other words, it's the way the market socialists were thinking about it, and I think this was endorsed by Hayek and the way he was arguing with them, is that, yeah, there's a bunch of dispersed knowledge in different minds around the economy. And the problem of the central planners is just if they could somehow mobilize all that and get access to all that information, that raw data, into a centralized location where a decision maker could have access to it in real time when making decisions. But that the form in which this raw information exists is fine, and it's just a matter of getting all that stuff into one spot. And what Joe is arguing is that no, that's missing something. That when we talk about economic calculation, and the thing that Mises was putting his finger on when he said that central planners would lack this, it wasn't just that, oh yeah, because the people who build bridges have a bunch of localized, specialized knowledge that even in principle they couldn't transmit to the planners. And then these people over here understand that, oh yeah, sometimes when I want to go out to eat, I'm in the mood for something sweet and spicy. And other times I want something savory. And other times I want something, blah, blah, blah. And it'd be hard for me to write that all up and get it across to somebody who's making decisions on my behalf. I just kind of need to be in the moment. And yeah, these are all true statements, and they're important to know and to understand when you're grappling with, different arrangements for economic organization, if you want to use phrases like that. But the point is, that's not what Mises was talking about. He was talking about something else, something qualitatively more fundamental. Okay. All right. So, namely that you need this institutional setup of decentralized private property ownership and the existence of a commonly accepted medium of exchange such that in the haggling in the markets for the various resources, genuine market prices emerge, and then you finally have a common denominator, and you can say, using expectations, and maybe you're wrong, but the point is the thing that you're trying to forecast is the right type of thing. Whereas if you're just a central planner, it's not enough just for you to kind of look ahead and say, well, gee, would people want more, SUVs in this scenario? Or maybe under what circumstances would they prefer to have the bridge? And what, maybe we make more diapers, maybe we make more turtlenecks, maybe we have more sporting events, and that pulls, labor out of certain other potential occupations. But the people like watching sporting events, but some of them don't. Geez, what do we do? Right? That it's not merely a technological engineering computational problem, that it's beyond that. There's something more fundamental at work, that the type of information that market prices convey is different. Maybe what I just said there is not quite right. Like the market price is the information. It's not that it's just, a surrogate or a proxy for something else. I think that's part of the issue that people are trying to get across here. The ones that are really stressing and saying, whoa, don't just read some of Hayek's stuff and think that he accurately summarized Mises' point. Okay. So now I went through all that, and let me now circle back to the original thing. The reason, I don't think I said this, the reason I'm talking about this, you said, well, you went back 3 years, Bob, and this thing that this Darren guy talked about 3 years, if for some reason it was making the rounds again. I don't think I said that at the outset. So that's why it's topical again. And people just recently were arguing about this on social media. And so here, let me give what my response is, that, right, if you conceived of the problem with socialism to merely be one of dispersed knowledge, and particularly if one of the big components is just, you don't know what people are going to want, then AI could help you deal with that. That's true. That would help mitigate the problem and make your forecasts more accurate. Okay? I think that's an unobjectionable claim. But there's two problems with that. So number one, again, I think what that mischaracterizes what Mises' objection to socialism was. Maybe it's a fair characterization of Hayek. And by the way, I saw some people arguing and saying, well, no, it's, this doesn't solve the problem because there's tacit knowledge and stuff that you can't communicate. I mean, yes, but AI can help solve that, right? Like I sometimes the AI algorithms, that are employed on Amazon or whatever, I think they do a pretty good job. And I think they're clearly going to get better over time. And so I don't know that there's this qualitative gap between, the types of things that Hayek was talking about and what AI could eventually do. All right, but there does seem to be, I think, a qualitative gap between that and what Mises was talking about. It puts you this way: the only way that the AI systems could approximate the problem is they would have to simulate, like if all of planet Earth were socialist. That's what we're talking about. Could a bunch of AI systems being used by the central planners, could that help them overcome the Misesian calculation problem? And I would say the only thing they could do is try to model and say, what if right now we had planet Earth with all of its starting, natural resources, all the different labor skills that people have, the location of everything, because that's important too. Where a factory is located is a big part of how do we integrate it into, the blueprint for what's the economic plan for the next 5 years. It matters where all the factories are located. If they're all located in Idaho, that means one thing. If they're spread out uniformly around the globe, that means something else, right? So that's, you plug all this raw data in as inputs, and then if you had the AIs did a simulation and said, now imagine there's private property in the means of production, and then we generate market prices and come up with like a simulation of a market economy on this, alt Earth, this alt capitalist Earth. And then the central planners looked at the outcomes in that simulation and said, so a ton of steel trades for this much against those farmland of this type of arability and whatnot. Oh, okay, fair enough. Then that might help them some. But it wouldn't be simply aggregating, consumer preferences and things like that. Like you would have to be simulating to try to say, if we had a market, what would it do? And then you could argue like the better that simulation is, the more you'd be containing the errors of the socialist decisions. Okay. But it would have to be something like that, which I don't think is what, Darren was getting into. Okay. However, even having said that, my next and final point here is to say, even thus far, still, at best, all that would show is central planners in the year 2026 using modern AI could try to approximate what the market economy could have produced spontaneously in a decentralized fashion based on, the year 2000 technology with fewer computers. Okay? Because all the computers needed and the AI systems that were dedicated to simulating the market economy to give the central planners some guidance as to the relative trade-off, the relative valuation of various types of inputs, those, supercomputers and AI systems, whatnot, if we switch to a genuine market economy instead of having a global socialist commonwealth, they could be used by industry in order to enhance what it is that the private businesses did. Okay, so again, it's given that the decentralized price system and private property and so forth, in the existence of genuine market prices and the aid they provide to calculation in the form of just accounting operations, given that contributes something to humanity, and that you're trying to approximate that with some make-arounds using supercomputers and AI and so forth under a socialist framework, I'm saying you have to take into account the opportunity cost. You can't ignore that. And so even if you thought the AI could give a decent approximation such that the calculation problem wouldn't be fatal, again, I'm not conceding that, but I'm just saying, suppose that were the case, still, you're using a large amount of society's potential resources for this task that the market economy would have solved. Maybe effortlessly is not the right word. I mean, it takes accountants and things, and you could argue that, under socialism, the human accountants get freed up to do something else. Okay. But I would just point that element out. And a lot of times don't see people explicitly accounting for that, no pun intended, when they talk about, does an AI solve these problems? That it's not, put it this way. I think some people believe that, right now, if Amazon's using AI to help determine, Jim Smith here in Tallahassee, he's ordered such and such in the past, and so why don't we send him these books, and why don't we send him these sneakers and this stuff or whatever? And we know it's his daughter's birthday coming up because it is every year, and he typically buys this kind of stuff. But sometimes he's late and he has to do a rush order. Why don't we send it a week ahead of time? And I bet you his daughter will like this stuff, and probably he'll like it even more to give to her than if he went browsing on his own last minute. Suppose that's all true. That doesn't prove, so actually socialism could get by, and that, the Austrians, maybe they had a point back in the 30s, but now modern technology has rendered their objections obsolete. No, because still the AI helps Amazon be more valuable and, more profitable and provide happiness to its customers embedded in a capitalist framework. Right? It's still the case. You can't send the guy in Tallahassee more stuff than he's able to afford. That wouldn't be efficient. That would be a waste of resources. Okay, so I'm saying all these advances that companies are making right now in the real world with AI, those improvements are only able to be steered properly and to actually be focused on where they're going to provide genuine value if their owners are embedded in a market economy and are responding to profit and loss signals. Okay.